Welcome, everybody. We are going to introduce you to Aisha Pandor, the co-founder and CEO of SweepSouth shortly. And somewhere after her introduction and going through her pivot, because if I can be daring, Aisha, and say something about SweepSouth, I think it's a high-tech, but also a high-touch business. And I think in the economy we are living, and the high-touch businesses we hit very hard. So we are looking forward to hear about your bravery and the pivot that SweepSouth is going through. And I hope that everybody who's attending will find something to relate to. So everybody in this session, you are welcome to make comments on the chat function. The chat function is completely in your control, where you can actually advertise what you do. You can ask questions. Buntu Majaja is going to look out for your questions, but we will handle the formal questions that are put up on the question and answer section. It's a different button at the bottom of your screen called Q&A. So write a full question in the Q&A function, and then Aisha will answer that at the end of the session. But your chat function, you can make comments, you can also ask questions, but we're not formally handling them. I think Buntu will try and answer them on the chat function, and we will revert back to the full screen afterwards. So it is my absolute pleasure to welcome Aisha Pandor to our interview today about pivots in COVID-19 of phenomenal companies. And what I love about SweepSouth is that SweepSouth is a South African company that really scaled fast, and everybody's watching it with admiration. And we're hoping you sell it one day, Aisha, so that we can also say that you had an amazing exit, so that the complete story of entrepreneurism will play out, and that you will then come back as this phenomenal entrepreneur and plow back into the ecosystem, the way Silicon Valley exits happen. So we're all watching your journey, and we're really excited about it. And in my preparation for this interview, I really looked you up and what you guys did, and I saw there was multiple fundraising experiences. So we're going to talk about the investor component as well. I just want to introduce you to Buntu Majaja. He's a director at the Innovation Summit, one of our youth faces. And Buntu's role on this is to do the poll and also help us just administer this whole process. Buntu, do you want to say hello?
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Aisha. It's an absolute pleasure to meet you, and looking forward to hearing the story, and also how sort of the entrepreneurial journey has been in the face of COVID. I do want to advise everyone and invite everyone to engage on the chats, engage in the questions as well. You can change who you send it to so that you can share with everyone, but really hoping we can have an engaging morning. So very excited. Thank you so much.
Yes, that's an important one. I see a lot of people write only to the panelists, but write to everybody, then everybody's part of the session. It makes it more interactive, and everybody can see your comments that you're sending to the panelists as well. So Aisha, welcome today. And my first question to you is, can you talk about, we'll talk about your pivot in a while, but let's start with SweepSouth before COVID-19. Tell us your journey, how big you became, how much money you raised to grow this business, and what are you particularly proud of? How many people work for you, just so that people in the audience get a sense of how big SweepSouth is.
Sure. So, Audrey, firstly, thank you very much for having me. Excited to talk today and to share. I think, as you say, not only SweepSouth's story, but how we're dealing with the current challenges that the pandemic faces. I think trying to just be very open about some of the difficulties that we're going through, in the hope that other founders and entrepreneurs can hopefully be encouraged, inspired, comforted by knowing that they're not alone. But going back to SweepSouth and how it started. So the company is almost 6 years old. We'll have our 6th birthday in June. And prior to starting SweepSouth, myself and my co-founder were working in the corporate space. My background is in human genetics, so I have a human genetics PhD, but when I finished studying, I went into management consulting, and so was working in quite a corporate environment. My co-founder, who's our CTO and who's also my husband, was also working in very big corporate kind of American software companies. And we both just not feeling very fulfilled, not feeling like our kind of personal potential and contribution to the world was being fulfilled in the spaces that we were in. And so we decided to resign from our jobs, resigned at the end of 2013, late 2013, at the same time, I think within about a month of each other. And we're working through different business ideas. And we initially really liked the idea of marketplace businesses. We like marketplaces because you've potentially got two customers who you're dealing with. On the one hand, your customers, and on the other hand, your service providers. And as you say, Audrey, you know, I like the idea of businesses that are online, high tech, but that also have a very real human component to them. And so we were working through different marketplace ideas, and kind of fast forward to the end of 2013, and our nanny at home said that she was going to be going away for the December holidays. We were still trying to work through business ideas, and you know, we were working through our savings, which we'd put up to kind of sustain us during this time. And so couldn't really, you know, waste time taking our eye off these different business ideas. And so we're trying to find a replacement for our nanny to help us at home while we were very busy. And through that process of trying to find someone to replace her just temporarily, we realized that South Africa has a big gap. So we have a lot of domestic workers in South Africa. There are over 1 million registered domestic workers in the country. Just under 2% of our total population is domestic workers. We obviously know the incredibly crucial role that domestic workers play in supporting their own families, but you know, working families as well. You know, people who are working in the corporate space, white collar workers, you know, and helping to look after homes, raise children, etc. But despite all of this, we just were completely frustrated by how difficult it was to get matched up with the right person at the right time, who wanted to work in that area for that specific amount of time. And so at the end of 2013, Uber had just launched in South Africa. I think they'd been in the country for about 6 months. Just under 6 months, and we were quite inspired by the idea of an Uber for home cleaning. It's evolved a lot since then, and our model is very, very different to Uber. It's, you know, high touch, high relationship. But at the time we thought, let's just build Uber for home cleaning. And so we spent about 5 months building the platform. And the idea was that if we could build a platform that helped people like us who are busy and need help at home get access to domestic workers, we would also be helping to solve challenges around unemployment or underemployment for domestic workers due to lack of access, due to not being able to market themselves, due to being at the wrong place at the wrong time. And so, you know, we thought we could really do something that answered those questions we had as employees about personal impact, about lending our skills to doing something that was really relevant and we felt passionate about. And so we launched SweepSouth about 6 months later. After also, you know, asking a couple of friends and hearing back that a lot of people had experienced the same challenges. So launched in June 2014, and it started off very small and very manual, you know, still working at home and interviewing a lot of the ladies who would join the platform from, you know, our dining room table, and we'd hold onboarding sessions, you know, on our couch. And you know, started off with very small numbers. We had 1 or 2 bookings the first month, and then 3 or 4 the next month, and then, you know, 8 and 16, and grew quite gradually. And you know, we'd do things like going out into the streets and trying to hand out flyers and standing at traffic lights and trying to get people to you know, to take a flyer or to sign up to make a booking. You know, a lot of just manual work in the early days, but very encouraged by the fact that people, once they did actually make a booking, just absolutely loved that experience of, I go online, you know, I book someone, I see who the person is who's going to come and clean my home. They've been vetted. I can receive their details. I can contact them before to have peace of mind. And then at the time when the booking should happen, that person actually arrives, they do a good job, and I'm able to rate them afterwards. So grew through a lot of word of mouth initially, and secured investment at the end of 2014, beginning of 2015. We had bootstrapped the business to that point, from building it in early 2014 to when we closed. I think we closed in March 2015. So for about 15 months, it bootstrapped the business.
So let's just talk about that, because a lot of entrepreneurs have to go through this. We bootstrap our businesses, and then you raise that first investment. I haven't checked whether the first investment was public knowledge. I saw your investment of October last year was public knowledge. Are you prepared to share that? And what did this do to your business? How did that
so, I
change?
mean, we're quite open about talking about who our investors are. And at that stage, I mean, I think we really struck it lucky. So we were living in Joburg at the time with very little money. We bought a plane ticket to go to Cape Town. Very little left in the bank. In fact, I didn't tell my co-founder and husband that I had signed us up for this conference, this pitching conference that was taking place in Cape Town. And my thinking was, I'd just try and, you know, pitch there and spread the word amongst Cape Town's kind of more mature startup community. And this is again in 2014, where Cape Town had Silicon Cape, for example. And so we went to this pitching conference, we pitched, we ended up winning the pitching competition. And one of the judges was a guy called Vinnie Lingham, who's a well-known, he's a California-based, but South African tech entrepreneur and investor. And he came to us afterwards and he just said, guys, like, that was a really amazing pitch. You know, you guys seem like a solid team skills-wise. There's one of you who's the operator, the business side, another person who's the builder who can, you know, actually build the software. And I'm really excited about this. Would you like to take on an investment? And we knew we were running out of money, but we weren't prepared for the investment conversation. And fortunately, you know, Vinny's a good guy and has been there himself. And so, you know, didn't take advantage. And he said, look, guys, like, starting off, I think your valuation should be around this much. And I think you should take on this much investment. It was much less than we thought we needed. And he said, and then, you know, I'll bring on a couple more investors, angel investors or seed stage investors. And you can raise again once you've gotten a bit more traction. And so that's actually how we raised our first round. It was kind of by chance, but also putting ourselves out there a little bit and not being too fussy at the time about valuation, for example, and the kind of nitty-gritties.
That's a beautiful story, and I think a lot of learning in that story, because that first valuation shakes so many people. When I talk to people who pitch in pitching dens, they say, but I don't have traction. How do I evaluate? There's always a valuation, but I think we've got very little knowledge about that first valuation, that seed money that a friend's family or fool will give you. And Winnie was a friend in that circumstance. So that's really helpful to hear about that. Okay, so then can you talk about your scaling and how big did you grow? Maybe fast track a little bit to last year before COVID.
So, you know, what that investment allowed us to do was to hire our first team members. We weren't too fussy about where they would be based. Again, because in Joburg at the time, we found few people who we were connected with who understood the concept of this is what a startup is. And so we weren't really fussy about, you know, where that person came from. And so our first two hires ended up coming from Cape Town. We hired an operations manager who was actually a guy who'd studied with me in the lab back in my genetics days, and hired a customer support person. They were working from my mom's house in Cape Town initially, and then just grew from there, really grew from there, you know, having the team members to help and to kind of handle some parts of the business. And so from that point where we were doing, you know, 10, 20, 30 bookings a month, we now, until recently, we're doing about over 50,000 bookings a month across Cape Town, Johannesburg, Durban, also operational in some smaller cities. We recently launched at the end of last year in Nairobi in Kenya. We've raised significantly more from institutional investors now at this point. And we've helped over 20,000 women who were previously unemployed or underemployed to find work through the platform. And so we're paying out on a weekly basis millions to domestic workers across the country.
Well, that is a real success story. And if any one of you look you up, they will see that their last round of investment was around 50 million. And I'm sure that puts a lot of also a responsibility in your hands towards your investors to scale this significantly. And maybe before we then say, aha, in March, COVID-19 struck, and even this amazing rising star business then had to pivot. Let's quickly do a poll with everybody in the room. I see we're 56 at the moment. Buntu, can you put up a poll? We're going to ask all of you, which of the following statements describe where you are in your business pivot? And business, you can say life pivot. We don't want to force you. We just want to show you that this process is a very similar process to any business change process. And firstly, are you reflecting that everything stays the same? We cannot pivot. And I acknowledge some businesses maybe cannot pivot. Then secondly, I experience anger at the changes I need to make. Or you can only tick one, the one that's most appropriate. I experience depression and inability to change, or I'm negotiating a new model, or I am co-creating a new business post-COVID-19. Can everybody participate? And the panelists, we can't vote. So Aisha, you'll tell us how you feel about all of that. But I think maybe we all go through all of those. But this is the question, where are you at the moment? So that we can have like a collective answer. We won't show your answer. And there's also not a right and a wrong. It's just reflective of the business people in this audience. Where are you at the moment? So we'll wait for everybody. You encourage, please participate, vote. We won't see what you vote, but you will get an outcome for everybody. And then Buntu, will you show us the results?
Yeah, right now we have about 36 people who have voted. So preliminarily, the largest groups is I am co-creating a new business post-COVID-19 with about 51% of the attendees saying so. And then the second one is I am negotiating a new model, and that's at about 42%. And then the others about 5% each of them. But essentially the entrepreneurs in the group here are being entrepreneurs and taking hands taking their destinies into their own hands, most of them. And we have now about 40 people in, and yeah, I think it's probably not going to change by much from that. The largest groups is still leading by creating a new business, and then the second largest is negotiating a new model.
Thank you so much. And I think I'm sure you'll show us the results when it comes through on the screen. If anybody wants to remove that screen, you just close it and you can continue. So Aisha, that shows you, I'm sure you went through all of that. I'm sure we felt anger. I don't know how deep we feel depression, everybody, but I know to feel sad about the loss, because everybody lost something. You know, when you change, you have to give up something, move into something new. All of those emotions are legitimate emotions for an entrepreneur to feel, but it's good news that most of us are negotiating a new future. We're fighting for a new future, fighting for the people we serve, and we're co-creating something that might even be better, because COVID was a big provocation. So let's talk about what COVID did to SweepSouth. So in March, I mean, I saw entrepreneurs saying, oh man, it's ridiculous. Oh, there's the results, you can see there. The last one leads by far, and then the second one, and then the others are spread. So that is just interesting for everybody participating to see where we as entrepreneurs stand, or human beings. If you work for a corporate, there's the result. So Aisha, back to you. COVID strikes, and what does SweepSouth do? Because suddenly not one single domestic worker can actually enter a house from, what was that, 21 March?
Yeah, so Audrey, we had a strategy session, I think end of Jan, beginning of February. And by that point, we were looking at what was happening internationally with the pandemic. And, you know, we could see that this was developing quite quickly. And so we tried to focus as a business on three distinct things. The one, first and foremost, was if we are not able to operate, how do we make sure that SweepStars, the thousands of women who have found work through the platform and relied on the platform to find work, how do we make sure that they are not in a position where their families are at jeopardy and they're going hungry? The second thing was looking at our team and how do we make sure that there's team continuity and we avoid things like having to have the team undergo retrenchments, etc. And then the third, and obviously crucial to supporting all of the above, was for the business, how do we ensure that there's business continuity as quickly as possible post-lockdown? And then also, how do we try and get back on track with our strategic plans? And so they are, and I say that they're three distinct things because they needed three very different responses. So, the first thing was supporting SweepStars during this time. And so the domestic workers who work through the platform. And so in late Feb, we appealed to all of our investors and we said, look, there's likely going to be some sort of severe restriction on movement, and it's probably going to mean that SweepStars aren't going to be able to work. Can we look at putting together some funds to help to support them? The other thing that we did was we did a platform change, which allowed customers to cancel, but allowed the option of supporting your regular SweepStar, even though you had canceled the booking. And that kind of continued on a rolling basis. So initially would be a 3-week cancellation during the first lockdown phase. And then when it was announced that lockdown would be extended, we then rolled that and extended it a further 2 weeks. And we're now in the process of just figuring out what level 4 means, for example, for SweepSouth bookings. And so what that did was it allowed our investors to step in and support. And so one of our impact or philanthropic investors, the Michael and Susan Dahl Foundation, have put 6 million rands towards a fund for SweepStars. Our customers collectively have been able to contribute, I think it's at this point about 2 million rand towards SweepStars through that platform app change that we made. And then we've also received some additional input and support from the public. And so we've raised over 8 million of a fund that we're targeting at 12 million. That'll help us to support SweepStars even if they're not able to work for 12 weeks in total. So that was the SweepStar side. And then on the team side, we had to, firstly from a business point of view, and then from a team point of view, we've had to make quite severe operational cost cutting within the company. And unfortunately, that's also involved salary reductions for the team. And, it's something that I think it's important to speak openly about because it's something that a lot of business owners are going through. It's an incredibly difficult process to have to go to your team and say, through no fault of your own, nothing that you've done wrong, just because we're trying to ensure that the business is able to survive this period, you're going to have to take a cut in your salary. And so that was a really, really difficult thing to go through, and we did it quite early. I remember saying to the team, I think everything's going to be okay, I think we're going to be able to handle this, and then kind of seeing COVID spreading out and seeing numbers, come into South Africa, jump in South Africa, and then having to go back and say to people, and it felt like it was very premature at the time, but having to go back and say, guys, we're going to have salary cuts. And And then the last thing is business continuity overall. And, you know, some of the kind of overhead reductions tie into that, but we've also gone back to our investors, and fortunately, they've been very supportive. But I think some of the key things have really been to act early, where it feels almost like you are overreacting and it feels uncomfortable because it feels like you're making a very severe decision when things don't feel as drastic to everyone as, you know, as a business owner and as someone who has to take that responsibility, as you have to try and cater for on the risk side. So yeah, so I think that is something that we did well, but was incredibly difficult to do.
Well, it's almost like what Cyril did. Total lockdown very early, and then saving a lot of spreading of the disease. And I'm sure you saved your company by acting early. I think the biggest mistake most entrepreneurs do is to wait too long because it's so painful.
Yeah, and I think we also are naturally optimistic as entrepreneurs. It's very difficult to be pessimistic. It's also difficult to wrap your head around this. You know, this is it is completely business unusual. It's an abnormal situation. You know, it's not just a recession. It's a recession and a global health crisis. So it's a very difficult thing to kind of wrap your head around what the repercussions of this will be, especially if you're an entrepreneur and your natural bent is to be optimistic. Absolutely.
Always hope for the best.
Yeah.
Yeah. So great strategies that you actually implemented in your business. Now you've explained to us how you were looking after your SweepSouth, which I think was your social and the people in your business, protecting your business. How did you look after your investors? Because I think, you know, I'm a part of this African investor group, and it's very interesting to see how hard investors can be because they are as fearful sometimes. And a lot of people have investors that doesn't have personal relationships with the business. They just want performance, and you're in a bind and the investor is in a bind. You managed to convince some of your philanthropic investors to go beyond measure, which I applaud you to do, that you managed that. But tell me, the other group of investors, how do you manage it? Because I think a lot of entrepreneurs worry about that.
Yeah, so I think we've always been very open with our investors. We've always made sure that we have a lot of communication with our investors as well. And so we spoke to them about the situation very candidly. And I think what made them feel better from the point of view of investors in the business is, again, that we were taking these early, quite severe cost-cutting measures, and then also that we were planning realistically. So we've redrafted budgets, and, you know, we've looked at different scenarios. There's a lot of uncertainty, so no one can say for sure this is what the outlook is going to be over the next 3, 6, 12 months. But we've, you know, looked at 3 different scenarios, kind of worst case scenario case, the kind of expectations if everything goes okay, and then a worst case scenario. And so, you know, and presented that to both our team and our investors on a strategic and a financial basis. And so I think that's helped them to give comfort that we're being realistic, we're being prudent, but we also are communicating and will continue to communicate as the situation unfolds. So I think what investors want to know is that you've got the situation under control, obviously as much as is possible with, you know, with all of the uncertainty and unknowns, but that you've got the situation under control, your eyes are open, you are reacting as the situation is unfolding, and again, that you're being realistic. You're not kind of buying into this false optimism and, you know, taking a wait and see or do nothing approach.
So can I just reinforce what you say and tell everybody on this group, recently when I spoke to the bank for a loan, the bank said that that's what they want, good communication, because everybody is in this together. So don't ignore the bank if you owe the bank. rather talk to the bank and manage the bank, over communicate at this stage. That is what investors and lenders want, because they're in this as much as you are, and they actually want you to succeed ultimately. And I think we forget that because you're on the other end. And I just wanted to reinforce that because that was a recent conversation I had. Are you creating any new products? Are you going digital? For survival, say COVID stays until March next year. What do you plan?
So, I mean, there are a few things. So we had developed additional verticals with SweepSouth prior to the pandemic kind of spreading. So we already had a SweepSouth shop, an e-commerce shop. It was very focused on cleaning products. And the idea was that the shop would provide cleaning products that would accompany our cleaning service when customers made a booking. We also were in the process of developing and had live in beta a platform called SweepSouth Connect, which works with electricians and plumbers and handymen and those sort of artisanal workers. And then we'd also expanded the actual SweepSouth platform to include outdoor work, so gardening services, pool cleaning, that sort of thing. So, part of looking at business continuity has been to say the very kind of inside the house, high touch services are probably going to be restricted at various times over the next 6 to 12 months. And so how do we bring forward our planning for these other verticals, which, may have been otherwise a little bit further down the line? We kind of, were okay to let them go and kind of slowly get feedback from customers, and the development of those verticals was quite slow. What we've done is sped up the development of those verticals significantly. So our shop has, I think we've got almost 70 different brands now under our e-commerce shop. There's a huge kind of surge in these e-commerce grocery delivery companies, but that's coming from demand. A lot of people are turning online to get, their home goods. And obviously, because we had this existing platform offering home products, we want to be able to do that for our customers and for other potential customers as well. Connect as a platform that's able to operate. It's an essential service, an emergency plumber, an emergency electrician, for example. So we've really sped up development on that platform. My co-founder, Alan, has been, coding day and night to kind of speed up just the process of progress on the Connect platform. And we've got some really exciting developments there. Have developed an AI component which looks at, you can take a picture of something around the house and it'll tell you which type of service provider you need to fix that problem, and also bring one up on the app who's most suitable to fixing it. And also are introducing video and audio to that as well, so that even if you're not able to see someone face to face, they can coach you on something that's been broken in the house. Our washing machine broke about 2 weeks ago. And luckily, Alan, my husband and co-founder, was able to fix it. But it would have been a disaster if we weren't able to get it up and running with all of the laundry and that we're doing, and obviously not able to get a replacement one. So there's also the option for people to kind of coach you into fixing things over a video call. So there's a lot that we're doing, and what we haven't done, and I think I also want to be clear about this, is the pivot is bringing forward strategic plans which were already existing and which fit the current circumstances. We're not pivoting and going SweepSouth is suddenly a manufacturing facility that's going to be making masks and sanitizers, and that's our business. Yeah. I think you've got to stay within your capabilities, within your what your infrastructure can support. The reality, obviously, is that we are going to be in a kind of a post-COVID situation for a long time. But that shouldn't. It shouldn't. If you have an existing business that was doing well, it shouldn't take you completely off course from your inherently what your mission was behind the business and your why. So you can change a bit of the how and the what, and and bring things forward or move things back accordingly, but you shouldn't unless obviously your business has absolutely been decimated. But I think you really should, if you've got a business that's had some traction, look at how can we bring plans forward, how can we push things back, how can we pivot slightly, but all within capabilities.
I think what's so good about these interviews, and we also only started with these pre-summit interviews because of COVID, is that I think we all get the sense of we're in this together. So just hearing you talk makes me feel more comfortable, because we're also creating new products. We must now go back to all our customers and sell new packages to them, and sell a new way of thinking, to go virtual instead of face-to-face that they so loved about a large event of connecting. Connecting is one of our most important value propositions. And the fact that we can now recreate this and actually make our businesses stronger. Yes, we'll feel the pain, but next year you will have a virtual and a real platform probably, and you will be double as strong as you used to be. So I think that is the good in the pain that we're experiencing. That's really excellent. Can we go to the questions and answers? I see there's quite a few questions. Aisha, can you open the Q&A?
Sure, yes. Yeah, I've got it, yeah.
So Buntu, are you going to read the questions and then Aisha can answer?
Great, thanks so much. So there's a couple here from Guy. I'm going to bundle both of these questions, Guy, just so everyone can also get them through. The first one is sort of getting a sense of balancing the need for cash and giving up of equity. So this came early on in the conversation when we were talking about early stage investment and that seed investment. How was that balance overcome in the experience? And then the other question here is in today's, I'm assuming, Guy, maybe that might be across the life cycle, or in Aisha's experience, what were the key metrics and indicators they were looking at daily?
Sure. So I mean, on balancing the need for cash and giving up of equity, I think one of the things that Vinny said to us, which really kind of hit home, was you don't need to raise everything that your business needs for the next few years in one go. So raise as little as you can to give your business 12, 18, 24 months of runway, and and try and do that at as good terms as is possible. But I think even more important than that, to this question for us, especially in the early days, was how do we make sure that we bring on the right type of investors, with the knowledge that this is going to be a relatively long-term relationship. So these are people who we're going to be engaging with very closely for the next at least 3 to 5 years, if not more. So how do we make sure that these are good people? They're going to have a really positive impact on the business. We're going to get along with them. We're aligned in terms of the vision and mission of the company. The kind of elevator. Would you like to be locked in a lift with this person for hours? Doing that test as well. So those things for me were as important as kind of the equity versus cash conversation. But I think, the answer is give yourself significant runway to be able to have traction. Don't give up. I wouldn't give up, in per round, anything more than around 30%, I think, and that's on the high end. So, obviously you want to give away as little as possible, but yeah, I think, again, the type of investor as important as all of that. And then around some of the metrics or indicators that we track daily. So, I mean, obviously it's changed during lockdown. So after the last 5 weeks or so, we haven't been able to measure the same metrics, and they've changed slightly. But prior to lockdown, it was things like the number of bookings that we have in a day. We would track the operational aspects of bookings. So, how many bookings versus how many people have said that they're on their way to go to a booking, how many people have arrived at a booking, how many people are busy working right now, how many people have closed a booking, how many customers have rated. So our company is probably quite a metric and heavy. There are a lot of things that we have, a lot of dashboards. I think we have over 200 different dashboards that measure millions of data points across the company. But it's obviously changed now during COVID. And now we look at things like, you know, income coming in through the different sources. Shop, for example, would be one of those. The fund, you know, would be another, kind of tracking the fund and contributions to the fund to go towards SweepStars. We'd measure SweepStar payments, but that's on a weekly basis. So we're still dispersing through the fund to SweepStars. And then SweepStar engagement is a very important one. So, you know, I think it's also important to say that although the ability to raise the fund came from an ethical and moral point of view, one of the things that's also important to us is that once lockdown ends, we have a group of still engaged SweepStars. So we're not starting again from, you know, zero when we're having to onboard people onto the platform to work.
Great. Thanks so much, Aisha.
Let me read the next one, because I think I'll have to be part of that answer. Andrew Malewezi is asking, how will this initiative help entrepreneurs outside South Africa? So I just want to say from this interview, I think the entire world is in the same space. So from that perspective, there's help to see how other entrepreneurs do it. But Aisha, you can answer which other countries you're rolling out, and is there anything for entrepreneurs in other countries? Because we've got quite an international following. I see people from Kenya, I see people from Nigeria, I see people from London on this call.
Yes, so I mean, obviously with the fund, it covers all of our SweepStars. So, you know, we're supporting our SweepStars in Kenya as well. And then I think maybe also just to answer that from the point of view of this discussion. So, you know, I'm the CEO of a business that is currently in a very, very difficult situation. I have 3 kids who are all at home at the moment, and, you know, and who are 1, 3, and 10. So, you know, I'm also doing homeschooling and all of that stuff as well. And despite that, I'm doing these sorts of talks because I want to help provide support to other entrepreneurs who are going through the same thing. And I want to be very honest about what we're facing as a company that's seen in some ways as a South African and African success story, but that is facing a very challenging time at the moment. And so I'm not, you know, just speaking to the Innovation Summit, for example. I've spoken to Endeavor entrepreneurs across the country and internationally. I've spoken on, you know, a different panel with entrepreneurs who are based in Nigeria and South Africa. So, you know, I think just by doing these sorts of interviews and getting perspectives from business owners, honest, candid perspectives, and not just doing it on South African forums, I'm hoping that that's going to help people to think about their own businesses, to have ideas about decisions to make, but also to know that they're not alone. And, you know, there are many of us who are going through the same things and having to make very difficult decisions.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Aisha.
Quinton, will you summarize the 2 John Hofmeyer questions?
Yeah, John here, I think is really looking at the pivot element, and two questions there was in terms of predicting the lockdown and, you know, coming up with implementation plans or strategies. How was that prediction made so early, and also the impact on employees when taking salary cuts? How to determine who to cut, where, how, and the quantum each, because there's a varied impact on of course across the board of different employees.
So maybe just to answer the kind of salary cut question first, I think it's never an easy decision. It's incredibly difficult. And there are various ways that you can do it. I think from our point of view, what we wanted to ultimately do is avoid any retrenchments within the company. And so to do that, we had to look at these strategic plans that we're bringing forward. Who are the team members that we need to be working absolute overtime at the moment? have those people be very actively working, and who are the people who unfortunately are not able to be as actively involved in our new strategic plans. And that's how we determined how the cuts would happen. Again, very difficult because, you know, it doesn't necessarily take into account everyone's individual situation. And there are ways that we've tried to support the team outside of this as well. And so, you know, what we said to the team when we decided on this approach, and we also firstly have repurposed some of the team to say, you know, this is your job under normal circumstances. But we polled everyone and looked at what the skills were across the team that didn't necessarily have to do with their, you know, their normal job or role or job description. And then looked at, based on those skills and what people do, how can we kind of repurpose them for these new plans? And then those who unfortunately weren't able to be as actively involved, we've said to them, you know, let us know where you're struggling. And within the team itself, we've put together a fund, not through the company, but the team, to help other team members who are struggling. And then we've also applied for government assistance, so TERS, UIF, that sort of thing, to try and help to bridge any salary reductions. But, you know, an incredibly difficult decision to make, probably one of the most difficult weeks that I've had as a founder at SweepSouth. And then thinking about predicting the lockdown. So we didn't necessarily predict the lockdown itself, but what we could see was that there was likely to be some form of social distancing. And knowing that our service depends on people being face-to-face inside a home, we kind of looked at what is, you know, worst case scenario. And we're quite fortunate, I suppose, in that we've got a management team that's made up of very different personalities. You know, you've got people who are very, very risk averse and kind of think about all of the what ifs and the worst case scenarios. And then we've got people who are a lot more optimistic and kind of, you know, let's just go for it, and ideas. And so this is one of the cases where the more risk averse team members were crucially important to the discussion. You know, because you ask those people, what do you think is going to happen? What's the absolute worst that could happen? And let's plan for that. And if that doesn't unfold, that's great. But if it does, then at least we're prepared.
Great. Thanks.
Okay,
Thanks so
I'm going
much.
to manage time a little bit. We've got 10 minutes left, and I see quite a few questions. So, Aisha, if you can be quite crisp in your answer, so that we can just drive through the value. Going to next question from Raisa.
Great, thanks. So Raisa is saying it's a great learning on how to create scenarios to support your business continuity, and imagining each scenario to the worst case scenario. Was this something your investors looked at as a contingency plan prior to investing? I suppose this question is sort of thinking up from the investors' impact. Is this something that they thought would be reasonable?
Yeah. So look, what I know all investors do is they take your projections at the point of investing into a business, and they look at, you know, what is the absolute worst case performance-wise that we expect for this business, and they build that into either the valuation of the business or into terms that they include in your agreements with them. So I know that investors themselves do this anyways, but that's more looking at kind of underperformance of a business against projections. I would love to say that, you know, the topic of a black swan event came up with any of our investors, but the truth is no. You know, I think, and very few people, I think, you know, it's less than 5% of businesses internationally actually have any sort of plans for a black swan event. And we are in the majority there, in that, you know, we never actually thought, well, what if there's a complete shutdown and we are absolutely not able to operate? So no, it certainly wasn't part of our normal planning. And I think, again, for many businesses, it's not something that we think about.
Thank you. I've got one question here from Moketsi in Botswana.
We actually have, we've got two questions from Moketsi from Botswana. Hi, Moketsi.
Hi, Moketsi. Yeah, the second one. So Moketsi is saying that in terms of the employees that may not be part of the future post-COVID strategy or may not be as relevant there, is there a thinking or exit or evolution plan for those employees? And Moketsi is saying that he's also looking for data-driven technology entrepreneurs from Digital Future in Botswana.
Cool. So I'll just answer the first one.
Yeah.
So in terms of an exit or evolution plan, I think it really ties into what are these other strategies that we're going to focus on. So as an example, you know, for Connect, are there ways that we can involve SweepStars into the Connect platform? We have partnerships with a range of other businesses and entrepreneurs. And if, you know, we're not able to absorb SweepStars into either core business, and I absolutely don't, I must say that I don't think that that's the case. I think I have a lot of confidence in the various strategies that we have planned over the coming weeks and months. But if long term, you know, post the next 3 months starting from lockdown, we aren't able to start reabsorbing SweepStars back into our business, then we'll look at what are the other businesses and partnerships that we can involve them in. So we've been having conversations with Smolin, one of our investors. They have a very good relationship with Unilever, and they've launched a plan called Shakti in India, which helps women to sell products, home care and other products into their communities. We've discussed the idea of SweepStars doing something like that. We are good friends with the guys at Zulzi, who are an online grocery shopping platform. They've used some of our SweepStars. There may be the opportunity to get some of our SweepStars onto that platform. So yes, there are various discussions underway, but first and foremost for us would be to reabsorb SweepStars back into the business, even if that involves some upskilling.
Great, thank you. I'm going to jump quickly to Helene's question. Thank you for the inspiring and thoughtful talk, Aisha. And she's curious in terms of the model on building regional providers or SweepStars, how that works, whether it's a franchise model or how is it structured?
So, I mean, I'll keep this one very short. We don't have a franchise model. We have a model where our headquarters provides a lot of the support work for any different cities or countries. And then we have a small base of employees within a given city or country who are kind of on the ground operationally focused.
Great,
right,
thank you.
Punto, would you allow me to take the next three together from Simangele?
Yeah, sure. I think those ones
Okay.
speak to the same thing. Go ahead.
So it's all about the grant that you got from Michael and Susan Foundation, and then what are the key elements that attracted investors to SweepSouth, probably your winning Lingam, but also your subsequent rounds, and how much traction did you have before you got your first investment? Maybe if you can answer that very shortly, because I think you covered some of it. Yeah.
Sure. So some of the elements that helped the Michael and Susan Dahl Foundation decide to give us the grant. So they're an investor in the business already. So they invested in the business. I think we closed the round in October last year. It was kind of a rolling close. So post us closing with NASPERS in May, they came on board as well. We had heavy due diligence. So they're an impact foundation. And so heavy due diligence around both business performance and growth, but also impact metrics. So things like what are SweepStars earning versus the average domestic worker? How is the platform making the work of domestic workers better versus them working privately? What are you doing? What's the positive work that you're doing outside of just earnings for SweepStars? What is the positive work that you're doing for the domestic work industry in the country? So a lot of due diligence prior to them coming on as an investor. And then I think, again, you know, we appealed to our investors and really explained the situation of domestic workers in the country and other workers who are earning kind of a weekly salary. And through that conversation, they decided to support us. They obviously, again, as a charitable foundation, want to make sure that that people are supported, that women are supported in particular, And we were able to demonstrate to them that, you know, lockdown means we're not earning any income as a business. We've got business expenses. There's zero income coming into the business during that time, or almost zero, apart from kind of the small income that's coming in from shop and other kind of minority sources. But, you know, there's no income coming into the business. We have costs that we need to sustain. SweepSouth are in a very difficult position, and through the work that we've done previously, they knew what this means for those societies that these women are in. The fact that they're primary breadwinners. We'd released studies previously where we looked at kind of the makeup of the average domestic worker in South Africa, and use that data to really just appeal and say, you know, this is what will be the severe impact on these women and their children, and in turn their societies, if we aren't able to support. So that's, yeah, that's where that came from.
Thank you. Thank you. I think the last ones, we'll just put them together. Maybe in closing, we do want to try and get to everybody, of course, but I think, you know, part of the second question around the DD and the due diligence that the investor did was partly covered, but maybe that can also go into, in closing, what advice you have for someone like Chike from Nigeria, who they also run a marketplace for creatives, and whether there's, you know, closing advice on the continent for those types of entrepreneurs that are starting businesses in the gig economy and marketplaces, etc.
I mean, I think so at a high level, you know, the kind of generic advice would just be to firstly make sure that you are in a space where you're well positioned to have an uncompetitive advantage. So, you know, you shouldn't just get into a space because it looks interesting. You should, you know, either have networks of in the space, knowledge of the space, something that positions you very well competitively. I think, and then having a good kind of founder or team, incredibly important. I think the ability to try and build something and have some traction, at least in the early days. And then I think gig economy specifically, the two pieces of advice that I would give are, the one is to model out your business from the beginning, roughly, and make sure that the business is sustainable. The problem with many gig economy businesses is that, you know, people roll out the business, it looks like a great idea, and then figure out that the unit economics are just unsustainable. And usually that's when you've gone quite far down the line. So make sure that the business is sustainable. And then I think the other thing would be to really just pay close attention to supply-demand imbalance. It's one of the most difficult things about gig economy, and we don't like the term gig economy for ourselves. We like using online marketplace or platform economy, but just trying to find that balance between supply and making sure that you have enough supply, but not so much that they sit there bored and get disengaged, and that you then are working very actively to match that up with demand.
Thank you.
Aisha, that was brilliant, and so many questions from our audience from across Africa and from South Africa. We really appreciate it. It was really inspiring also to know that such a successful business as your own are in it, like all of us are in it. So from my side, I thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for your insight. Thank you for sharing and being open about this process that everybody's going through, and helping all of us feeling less alone and inspiring us to come up with new ideas. Good luck with
my pleasure. Thank you. Thanks very much, and thank you for having me.
We want you to be an absolute success, and we know that this wobble will also pass. So good luck with your future. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Audrey. I really appreciate that. And I also just want to wish everyone else good luck. Yeah, as you say, we're in this together, and I think we'll get out of this together. So good luck to everyone, and thank you so much for having me.
Fantastic.
Got here the audience, but they're clapping. And lots
round of applause.
Thanks, Buntu. Thanks,
Standing ovation. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you, everybody.